At 3:47 a.m. in the southern Caribbean, the night sea rolled heavily about 45 miles southeast of Bonaire. On the radar screen aboard the USS Thomas Hudner, a faint and unusual signal appeared, a fast-moving shadow slipping out of the waters near La Guajira, Colombia. On board was a massive shipment of illegal narcotics, possibly hundreds of pounds, maybe even close to a ton, headed toward a covert rendezvous somewhere along the route to the Gulf of Mexico. Once across the wide Caribbean, the traffickers would be one step closer to the shores of the United States. But this time, luck was not on their side. There would be no clean getaway. In less than 10 minutes, elite U.S. Navy forces were set to strike, and the cartel's multi-million-dollar vessel would disappear into the rough, black water. 8 days earlier, an ordinary shipping container sat at the port of Buenaventura, Colombia. On the outside, the paperwork identified the cargo as refined sugar. Hidden inside, however, were tightly packed bricks of narcotics concealed behind false walls, surrounded by silica gel packets meant to throw off detection dogs. When the container was sealed, security cameras recorded nothing suspicious. Soon after, a 722-foot cargo ship with a dark-colored hull left port and followed the standard commercial route north. After stopping near Moín, Costa Rica, the trafficking operation moved into its next phase using the so-called rip-on, rip-off method. Corrupt customs officials were paid off. The container was opened with a master key. The concealed shipment was removed, transferred into another container loaded with fruit, and then sealed again. Meanwhile, the mothership's AIS tracking system kept broadcasting normally, making it look no different from countless other commercial vessels crossing the region. Up to that point, everything had gone exactly as planned. But once the ship entered the southern Caribbean, waters constantly monitored by the U.S. Navy, even the smallest mistake could bring the entire operation down within minutes. At 3:15 a.m., the vessel pushed forward through the darkness, unaware it was already being watched. High above, a P-8 Poseidon moved through the night at 490 knots and 15,000 feet. Though it remained nearly 200 miles from the suspected smuggling ship, its advanced surveillance systems had already locked on. Flight Commander Lieutenant Colonel Evans studied the APY-10 radar with precision. The system could scan the sea surface, cut through wave clutter, and identify objects far too small for ordinary detection. Then it appeared, a faint mark pulling away from the mothership's AIS track, a go-fast boat. The 39-foot craft, powered by 4 outboard engines producing more than 1,000 horsepower, was racing across the water at over 40 knots. More importantly, it carried no AIS signal at all, a major red flag in open water. Within seconds, the P-8 compressed the target data and sent it through the Link 16 network to the USS Thomas Hudner, operating hundreds of miles away. Inside the destroyer's Combat Information Center, the fast boat's course flashed onto the tactical display like a bright red slash across the map of the ocean. The night pursuit had begun. At 3:48 a.m., a UH-1Y Venom helicopter lifted off from the deck of the Hudner and moved into the darkness, locking its searchlight and laser designator onto the fleeing boat. In an instant, the open water turned into a trap that was about to snap shut. By 3:50 a.m., 2 RHIBs had already launched from the deck of the USS Thomas Hudner, slicing through the swells at full speed. Their engines roared as the reinforced hulls slammed against the rising waves. Behind armored shields, Navy gunners held steady, M240s locked forward. The pursuit was on. The go-fast boat veered sharply, throwing up a curtain of white spray as it tried to break away. The traffickers answered with heavy gunfire, rounds snapping past the RHIBs and punching columns of water into the air. One explosive charge hit the sea nearby, sending up a violent burst of water that rocked one of the pursuing boats. But the American crews reacted instantly, correcting course and driving straight back toward the target. Rounds from the M240s began striking the water close to the smuggler's hull, forcing the boat to jolt off its line. Even so, the crew fought back hard. One man raised a rifle fitted with a grenade launcher and aimed directly at the lead RHIB. Then, at the most critical moment, a dark shape ripped across the sky. The UH-1Y Venom swept into view, its rotor wash hammering the sea like rolling thunder. A blinding searchlight dropped onto the fleeing boat, freezing the smugglers in its glare. Instinctively, they threw up their hands to shield their eyes, looking up into the white beam as if the night itself had turned against them. The helicopter circled overhead, its M134 minigun sending warning tracers across the water just ahead of the bow, cutting off any clear escape route. From the aircraft, a marksman took his chance and fired. The shot struck the man with the launcher in the shoulder, knocking him off balance. His weapon clattered across the deck and disappeared into the sea. He collapsed with a cry, clutching the wound as the boat lurched forward again. Desperate now, the smugglers began tossing packages of contraband overboard, hoping to erase the evidence. But the Venom's thermal optics tracked every movement, capturing every bundle that hit the water, every streak of fuel spreading across the surface. The RHIBs closed the distance. Another burst of 7.62mm fire tore into the outboard engines. Flames flashed up. The boat shuddered hard, losing power almost immediately. Through smoke, spray, and confusion, the two RHIBs surged alongside, pinning the disabled craft from both sides. The visit, board, search, and seizure team, wearing night vision gear, jumped across with weapons trained on the stunned crew. "Hands up! Drop your weapons!" The command carried over the waves. Two of the traffickers tried to resist with a few panicked shots, but they were overwhelmed within seconds and forced face down onto the deck, wrists bound with zip ties. Under the harsh searchlights, scattered bricks of illegal cargo lay across the floor beside abandoned rifles, while the men who had moments earlier acted untouchable now sat shaking in silence. Was it over? Not even close. The go-fast boat had been only a distraction, a decoy meant to pull attention away from something far more valuable slipping through the dark. But the cartel had made one fatal mistake. They had underestimated how wide the Navy had cast its net. At 3:53 a.m., around 12 miles north of the captured boat, another shape began to emerge from the darkness, low, narrow, and barely visible against the restless surface. It was a self-propelled semi-submersible, about 65 feet long, painted a dull gray-green to blend with the sea. Only its small conning tower rose above the waterline, designed to reduce its radar signature and keep it hidden for as long as possible. But it had already been found. Deep below the surface, the USS Cheyenne, a Los Angeles-class nuclear-powered attack submarine, had been tracking the vessel for some time. Its role was not to strike, but to listen, follow, and report. From a concealed position, Cheyenne's sonar had locked onto the semi-submersible and quietly fed exact coordinates back to command. The trap was tightening, above and below the surface, and this second target was heading straight into it. A sonar buoy dropped from the P-8 Poseidon slipped into the water, quietly marking the target's location for the ships above. Even though the radar aboard the USS Thomas Hudner couldn't pick up the low-profile vessel, the combined data from underwater tracking and airborne surveillance painted a clear picture. The target's position was no longer a mystery. By 3:55 a.m., another RHIB launched from the Hudner, carrying a fully prepared VBSS team. As the small craft sped closer, the crew aboard the semi-submersible realized they had been found. Panic set in. The hatch flew open and bursts of gunfire were sprayed wildly across the water, more out of desperation than precision. One of them tossed an explosive overboard, but it detonated harmlessly in the sea, sending up nothing more than a plume of water. The HIB kept advancing, circling into position. A well-placed shot struck the vessel's snorkel system. Almost immediately, thick dark smoke began pouring out as the craft lost stability and control. Seizing the moment, the VBSS team moved in fast, boarding the vessel and overpowering the shaken crew within seconds. Inside, the scene was staggering. Stacks of tightly wrapped packages filled the narrow interior from floor to ceiling. The cargo was packed with precision, forming dense rows that left barely any space to move. The crew sat motionless, surrounded by scattered gear, their earlier confidence gone, replaced by a stunned silence. By 4:44 a.m., as the first light of dawn spread across the Caribbean, the operation shifted from action to cleanup. Alongside the USS Thomas Hudner, the damaged go-fast boat was secured and towed. Its fiberglass hull was cracked, its engines burned beyond repair. It was no longer safe to operate. A drifting wreck like that could become a serious hazard, a hidden threat to cargo ships or fishing vessels. Towing it across hundreds of miles of open ocean wasn't an option. A Coast Guard officer on board made the call. The vessel was not seaworthy. It was cleared for controlled disposal. The VBSS team got to work stripping anything of value or importance: navigation systems, fuel tanks, mechanical components. Every recovered package from both the go-fast boat and the semi-submersible was catalogued, sealed, and secured in the ship's evidence storage. In a temporary holding area, 6 detained individuals sat quietly, watching as the vessel that once represented a fortune was reduced to scrap. The reality of the situation had fully set in. Soon after, another RHIB approached carrying a small demolition charge. Divers carefully secured it just below the waterline of the abandoned boat. The intention wasn't to create a dramatic blast, but something far more controlled, enough to breach the hull and let the ocean do the rest. On my command, detonate! A dull thump followed. No fireball, no shockwave, just a quiet release beneath the surface. Bubbles rose and spread across the water as the vessel slowly slipped beneath the waves. Within moments, it was gone, leaving behind nothing but a calm stretch of sea. Overhead, the steady hum of a Seahawk helicopter was the only sound that remained. Back on deck, the remaining seized cargo was handled according to strict procedures. Not all of it would make the journey back to shore. A significant portion was destroyed on site. Packages were fed into the ship's incineration system, where they burned under controlled conditions. Thick smoke rose briefly into the morning air before being carried away by the ocean breeze. By sunrise, the operation was complete. A coordinated effort across air, surface, and subsurface forces executed with precision, leaving no trace behind except open water. Aside from the steady thump of the Seahawk helicopter circling above, the disabled boat slipped quietly beneath the surface, leaving barely a trace behind. On the deck of the USS Thomas Hudner, the remaining seized cargo was directed into an improvised incineration system. Much of it never returned to port. Most was destroyed immediately under emergency procedures. Torn white bundles were fed into the flames, sending thick smoke upward before the ocean breeze carried it away. There was no spectacle, no dramatic display, just controlled, methodical execution. The goal wasn't to create a scene, but to remove a threat, secure the waters, and send a message without saying a word. Smugglers may rely on hidden compartments, high-speed boats, or even low-profile vessels designed for long-distance travel. But once they move into open water, there are no guarantees. Speed has limits, distance offers no real protection, and when naval forces lock onto a target, the outcome becomes increasingly predictable. This wasn't just about stopping one operation. It was a reminder of who ultimately controls the open sea. The mission carried out by the USS Thomas Hudner in the Southern Caribbean is only a small piece of a much larger global effort against organized trafficking networks. The region's geography makes it a key transit zone, positioned between major production areas in South America and high-demand markets in North America and Europe. Because of that, it remains one of the most active maritime corridors in the world. The tactics used continue to evolve. Fast boats and semi-submersibles are just two examples of how traffickers adapt to the scale and complexity of the ocean. Similar patterns can be seen elsewhere. The Eastern Pacific remains a major route toward the United States, often involving long-range chases across open water. Along the western and eastern coasts of Africa, limited monitoring creates opportunities for staging and transfer operations heading toward Europe. In the Mediterranean, overlapping routes add further pressure, with multiple forms of illicit transport sharing the same pathways. Across all these, one constant remains: a continuous back and forth between enforcement and those trying to stay ahead of it. Methods change, routes shift, and technology advances on both sides. Operations like this highlight the importance of coordination, precision, and persistence in maintaining maritime security. Out there, beyond the shoreline, control isn't claimed, it's enforced.